You know, I have been quiet for a while now, watching, listening, and frankly getting more concerned with each passing month. What I am seeing right now, well, it troubles me in a way that is hard to put into words. There is something happening in this country, something dangerous, and most people do not even see it. They are walking right into a trap that has been set for them by their own desires, by the culture, by the advertisements that scream at them every single day. And the trap has a name. It is called debt. But here is the part that should wake you up in the middle of the night. Debt is not the enemy. Let me say that again because I know it sounds strange coming from me. Debt itself is not the enemy. You see, there are two kinds of people in this world when it comes to money. There are people who use debt to slowly, quietly destroy their lives, and there are people who use the same tool to build empires that last for generations. Same banks, same interest rates, same contracts, but completely, utterly different outcomes. And the difference is not luck, it is not inheritance, it is not some secret handshake, it is a way of thinking. It is understanding something so simple that a child could grasp it, yet so powerful that it separates the wealthy from the broke, the free from the trapped, the builders from the consumers. I want to tell you something that might shock you. The rich, the truly wealthy, the people building generational fortunes right now as we speak, they use debt all the time. They leverage their capital, they borrow from banks, and they structure deals with other people's money. And they do it without fear, without panic, without losing sleep at night. Meanwhile, the average person is terrified of debt. Or worse, they are already drowning in it, paying interest on cars they cannot afford, houses that are too big, vacations they took 2 years ago that they are still paying for today. So what is the difference? Why does debt make one person rich and another person poor? That is what I want to explain to you today. And I'm going to be very direct about it because I think we are running out of time. I think we are at one of those points in history where the decisions you make in the next 5 years will determine the next 50 years of your life and the lives of your children. Now, I have always said that if you are smart, you do not need leverage. And if you are dumb, you have no business using it. I still believe that. But let me clarify. Smart means you understand the difference between an asset and a liability. Smart means you can delay gratification. Smart means you understand risk, real risk, not the kind that some salesman tells you is safe. Dumb is borrowing money to buy things that lose value. Dumb is thinking that because you can afford the monthly payment, you can afford the thing. Dumb is using your home like an ATM. Imagine two people standing in the same bank on the same day. Both are about to borrow $50,000. The first person is going to use that money to buy a brand new truck, fully loaded, the works. The second person is going to use that $50,000 as a down payment on a small duplex. Nothing fancy, just 2 units, reliable tenants, steady rent. 5 years go by. The first person, the one with the truck, well, that truck is now worth maybe $25,000 if he is lucky. He has paid tens of thousands in interest. That truck has been nothing but a drain. If he wants to sell it, he is underwater. That debt has made him poor. The second person, the one with the duplex, every single month for 5 years, her tenants have been paying rent. That rent has covered her mortgage, her taxes, her insurance, and still left a little in her pocket. Her tenants have been buying that building for her. Now, 5 years later, she has paid down the mortgage. The building is worth more. She has equity. She has cash flow. She has options. That debt has made her richer. Same bank, same amount borrowed. One person is trapped, one person is free. That is the difference between bad debt and good debt, between consumption and production, between poverty and wealth. Debt is a tool. It is a lever. And like any lever, it magnifies force. If you are pushing toward assets that produce income, that lever makes you stronger. But if you are pushing toward consumption, toward things that lose value, that same lever crushes you. Let me tell you something else. We are living in very strange times. Interest rates have been low for a very long time. Money has been cheap. People have stopped asking the hard questions. What happens when rates go up? What happens when the economy slows down? What happens when they lose their job? They have no margin of safety. And without a margin of safety, debt is not a tool. It is a time bomb. I've been through enough cycles to know what comes next. I cannot tell you when. I cannot tell you exactly how. But I can tell you this. When the tide goes out, and it always does, you find out who has been swimming naked. And right now, there are a whole lot of people swimming naked. They are leveraged to the hilt on assets they do not understand, with terms they have not read, in markets they think will go up forever. And when reality comes knocking, they are going to get hurt badly. But it does not have to be you. If you understand what I am about to tell you, if you take the time to learn how the wealthy think about debt, how they structure it, how they protect themselves, then you can be on the other side of that equation. You can be the person who survives the storm and comes out stronger. That is what I want for you. That is why I am speaking to you today with more urgency than I usually do, because I think time is running out. I think the lessons are about to get very expensive for people who do not understand them. And I do not want you to be one of those people. Most people are not just using debt the wrong way. They are being systematically trained to use it the wrong way. You are being nudged, pushed, and sometimes shoved into decisions that make other people rich while making you weaker and more dependent. And it all starts with confusing bad debt with good debt. Over my lifetime, I have watched entire generations weighed down by obligations they barely understood when they signed their names. I have seen young people begin their adult lives buried under loans that will follow them for decades. And most of those obligations are not tied to anything that produces income. They are tied to consumption, to lifestyle, to the need to look successful before actually being successful. Let me tell you how this usually happens. It does not start with one giant mistake. It starts with 100 small ones. A credit card here, a car loan there, a phone bought on installments. Each one seems manageable, but added together, they form a chain, and that chain gets heavier every year. When I say bad debt, I mean borrowing money for something that will not put money back into your pocket, something that will almost certainly be worth less in the future. Credit card debt for everyday spending is bad debt. Financing a vacation is bad debt. Taking out a long-term loan for a nicer car than you need, that is usually bad debt too. The second you drive that car off the lot, its value starts falling. The bank still wants its full amount. The interest meter is still running, but the collateral is shrinking. There is another category I would call dangerous neutral. A mortgage can be reasonable if you buy a modest home at a reasonable price with a payment that leaves you plenty of room, but a mortgage becomes dangerous when you stretch to the limit, when you buy the maximum the bank will allow instead of what you can comfortably afford. Student loans can fall into this area. Education can increase your earning power, but borrowing heavily for a degree with little earning potential, or borrowing far more than you need for living expenses, that is wishful thinking wrapped in a contract. Now, let me contrast this with disciplined, productive debt. This is the kind of borrowing that some wealthy people use, not recklessly, not frequently, very selectively. It is tied to assets with a high probability of generating reliable cash flow. An apartment building that has stayed full, a business with consistent profits, a well-understood, fairly priced asset where the income comfortably covers the interest and the principal over time. And even then, the wise use of debt comes with a margin of safety. That means you plan for things to go wrong, you assume expenses will be higher, you assume income will be lower, you assume interest rates could rise. If the deal still works under those harsher assumptions, it might be worth using some debt. If it only works in a perfect world, that is not an investment. That is a fantasy. The rich, the ones who last, use long-term, fixed-rate, conservative debt when they use it at all. They want predictability. They avoid short-term borrowing that can be called back at the worst possible moment. They avoid complex structures they do not fully understand. The average person does almost the opposite. They stretch to the edge of what lenders will allow. They take on variable rate debt. They sign up for conditions they do not read. They assume the future will bail them out. Hope is not a financial plan. Preparation is. Imagine two balance sheets. On one, you see liabilities, credit cards, car loans, a mortgage too large. On the asset side, furniture, electronics, cars, maybe a house with very little equity. Almost nothing produces income. Everything requires ongoing payments. On the other balance sheet, you also see liabilities. Maybe a mortgage on a rental property, maybe debt tied to a business. But on the asset side, you see things that generate money. Properties with tenants, businesses with profits, cash reserves. The liabilities are attached to assets that can carry their own weight. Both people use debt. One is drowning, one is building. The real danger today is that bad debt has become normalized. It is promoted. It is sold as convenience, as flexibility. Pay later, zero down, easy installments. You see it everywhere. You rarely see a reminder of the long-term cost. Compounding works in both directions. When it works for you, it is a miracle. When it works against you, it is a nightmare. If you revolve a credit card balance at a high interest rate, you can easily end up paying 2 or 3 times the sticker price of whatever you bought. That is a wealth transfer from you to the lender. So what should you do if you are already in this trap? If you are carrying bad debt, the first step is to stop digging. That means no new consumer debt. You cannot build wealth if you keep punching holes in your own boat. Next, you need a clear list of every obligation you have, amount owed, interest rate, minimum payment. You cannot win a game if you refuse to look at the score. Then you need a plan to attack the highest cost debts first while paying at least the minimum on the rest. This is not exciting, but it is the path out. Over time, as the bad debt shrinks, your cash flow improves. Every dollar that used to go to interest can be redirected to savings and eventually to investments. You move from being a slave to your past to being a partner with your future. You do not need debt to become wealthy. The safest path for most people is simple. Live below your means. Avoid bad debt. Invest regularly in broad productive assets and let compounding work over decades. That is enough. What the rich do with selective productive debt is optional. It is an advanced tool for people who already have a strong foundation. It is not a shortcut for people who are behind. There is a habit that has kept me alive in markets for a very long time. It is fear, properly directed. Not fear of volatility, fear of permanent loss, fear of getting into a position where one bad break wipes you out. That fear has kept me conservative with debt for my entire life. And it is the same fear you should cultivate. The people who last, the ones who stay rich instead of just getting rich for a moment, they think in terms of survival first and profit second. They ask, if this goes badly, do I live to fight another day? That is not pessimism. That is realism. Over a long enough life, bad things happen. If your use of debt assumes a smooth road, you are in danger. When I look at an opportunity that involves borrowing, I do not ask, how much can I make if everything works? I ask, how much can I lose if it does not? I want to know the edge of the cliff. I want to know what happens in a recession. I want to know what happens if sales drop by half, if financing dries up. If the answer is that I could be forced to sell at the worst possible time, I am not interested, no matter how good the upside looks on paper. Rich people who stay rich think in distributions of outcomes, not just best case scenarios. They leave room for error, for bad luck, for the unknown. If a rental property only works if occupancy is perfect and expenses are minimal, That is hope dressed up as analysis. The wealthy use debt when they use it to finance things that would likely survive even a nasty storm. Boring businesses with durable demand. Properties in locations where people have to live and work no matter what. Cash flowing assets bought at reasonable prices. And they structure their debt in ways that reduce the chance of sudden demands. They prefer long-term commitments with known terms. There is a term for when your lenders want their money back before your assets can pay you back. It is called a liquidity squeeze. Using short-term debt to fund long-term assets is dangerous. That mismatch has killed many very smart people. The rich also understand something many overlook. Flexibility is a form of wealth. Having cash, having low fixed obligations, and having the ability to wait for a good pitch are enormous advantages. Debt reduces flexibility. It commits you. It narrows your options. Think about a business that is loaded up on cheap debt in good times. Everything looks great when sales are strong. Then a recession hits. Sales drop. The interest bill has not gone anywhere. Suddenly, they are forced into decisions by the weight of their obligations. They sell good assets at bad prices. Contrast that with a business that kept its debt moderate. When the storm comes, it has room to maneuver. It can keep investing when others are cutting. It can buy from those who are over-leveraged. That is how wealth shifts during crises. From the leverage to the prudent, this applies to individuals too. If your fixed monthly obligations are very high, you have very little flexibility. Your job owns you. A small disruption feels like a disaster. So if you are serious about turning debt from a weapon into a tool, you need to adopt a survival mindset. Ask yourself, if my income dropped by a third, could I still meet my obligations? If interest rates went up significantly, would I be all right? If the value of my assets fell sharply, would I be wiped out or just uncomfortable? Those are protective questions. You might not like the answers at first. That is fine. It is better to feel uncomfortable now than to be shocked later. Start reducing the commitments that threaten your survival. That might mean driving a cheaper car, living in a smaller place. Your goal is not to impress people. Your goal is to become free. The rich separate volatility from danger. Volatility is prices moving up and down. Danger is the possibility of permanent loss or forced selling. Debt increases danger because it introduces the possibility that someone can demand something from you at a specific time, whether convenient or not. When a wealthy person uses debt to buy a cash-flowing asset, they are less concerned about daily price changes. They care about whether the cash flow will cover the debt service with room to spare. If the property price drops but the rents are steady, that is volatility, not danger. But if the cash flow is not enough to service the debt, then volatility can become dangerous very quickly. This is why the best way to sleep well at night is to avoid situations where you can be forced to act. Forced selling is almost always disastrous. The people with cash and little debt are on the other side of that transaction, buying what you are forced to give up. Train yourself to love flexibility more than speed, to love survival more than excitement, to love boring income more than thrilling stories. Boring, steady cash flow pays debt. Stories do not. Let me also address something that confuses many. They see that large firms sometimes carry significant debt. They conclude that borrowing big is how you get big. That is backwards. The only reason certain firms can safely carry meaningful debt is that they have highly stable earnings, strong positions, and large reserves. The strength came first, the debt came later. Trying to imitate the surface behavior of the rich without understanding the foundation is how people get hurt. You do not start with leverage. You earn the right to use it slowly through discipline, knowledge, and a balance sheet that can take a punch. The rich turn debt into wealth not because they are fearless, but because they are cautious. They respect what debt can do if they are wrong. They obsess over the downside. They give up some upside in exchange for protection. They walk away from deals that look exciting but fragile. And because of that, when the rare, truly exceptional opportunity appears, they are still standing. They have cash. They have capacity. They have the option to act. Most people do the opposite. They stretch themselves thin chasing marginal opportunities, and when the big one finally comes, they are already tapped out. You and I need to have a very honest conversation right now. If you do not take control of the way debt flows through your life, it will control you. And once that happens, every decision will be filtered through one question. How do I keep up with my payments? That is not freedom. That is financial captivity. I have spent my whole career looking at balance sheets, but the most dangerous balance sheet these days is the one nobody prints, the household balance sheet, the quiet story of what you owe and what you own. The rich treat their household finances like a business. The poor and middle class are taught to treat theirs like a shopping list. That difference over 30 or 40 years is enormous. Let me walk you through how the truly financially strong think about debt in their personal lives. First, they decide what role debt will play, if any, before opportunities show up. They start from a simple principle: their future freedom is more important than their present image. They separate their world into three buckets: non-negotiable safety, flexible comfort, long-term growth. Non-negotiable safety is the foundation, the emergency fund, the low fixed expenses, the decision to keep their basic life affordable, even if their income dropped. The rich do something interesting here. When their income rises, they do not immediately let their fixed obligations rise at the same pace. They are very slow to lock in bigger monthly payments. Most people do the reverse. Their fixed costs rise as fast as their income. New apartment, new car, new subscriptions. On paper, they are earning more. In reality, they are standing on the same thin ledge, just at a higher altitude. So, if you want to start thinking like the rich, you begin by shrinking that ledge. List your fixed monthly obligations: housing, transportation, debt payments, subscriptions, insurance, food. Then ask, if my income dropped by a third, could I handle this? If the answer is no, you have work to do. That work might look like moving to a more modest place for a few years, driving a simpler car you can own outright, canceling recurring charges that do not truly improve your life. This is not glamorous, but this is how you widen the ledge under your feet. The second bucket is flexible comfort: eating out, hobbies, trips, gadgets. Most people mix this bucket with debt. They finance comfort. The rich do not like financing comfort. If they want a luxury, they either pay cash from a small portion of their surplus or they do not buy it. Comfort is a reward, not a liability. The third bucket is long-term growth. The rich direct a meaningful portion of their income into assets that have a reasonable chance of growing or producing income. A broad market stock fund, a rental property, a share of a business, or, in some cases, a carefully chosen opportunity that involves modest, well-structured debt tied directly to the asset. For most people, the path is straightforward. Before using any debt for growth, you build your safety bucket and eliminate bad debt. You get used to living on less than you earn. You build the habit of investing regularly into something simple and productive. That habit is far more important than any clever trick. Now, some of you are going to ask, Warren, where exactly does using debt to build wealth fit into this picture? The answer is this: they use debt only when it sits on top of a strong foundation, and only when three conditions are met. Condition one: the asset is productive and understandable, not a lottery ticket, not a story stock. If they buy a property, they understand the neighborhood, the rents, and the expenses. If they buy a business, they understand how it makes money, why customers come back. They do not borrow against mysteries. Condition two: the cash flow comfortably covers the debt, not just in the best year, but in an average or even a bad year. If you need perfection for the numbers to work, the rich walk away. Condition three: the terms match the reality of the asset. Long-term asset, long-term fixed debt. None of this funding a 20-year project with a 1-year loan. That mismatch has destroyed many people. Let me give you a household example. Imagine a couple that has paid down their bad debt. They have a solid savings buffer. Their fixed expenses are modest. They have been investing monthly in a stock index fund for years. Now they are considering buying a small rental property. The impatient way would be to stretch for the biggest property the bank will approve, using as little down payment as possible. The disciplined way looks different. They choose a plain property in a good, stable area. They insist on a price that makes sense relative to the rent. They put down a meaningful down payment, so the mortgage is manageable. They run the numbers assuming vacancies, repairs, and surprises. If the deal still works with those conservative assumptions, they proceed. If not, they wait. In the disciplined version, the debt is not carrying the whole load. It is helping to acquire an asset that can carry itself. If you are thinking, Warren, this sounds slow, this sounds boring, you are right, it is slow, it is boring, but it works. The rich are not rich because they found some magic shortcut. They are rich because they made a series of rational, mostly unexciting decisions over and over for a very long time. How do you begin from where you are? If you are early in your life, avoid the traps, do not load up on consumer debt, live with roommates, drive something cheap, put a piece of every paycheck into savings, then into simple investments. If you are in the middle of life and already burdened, your first job is triage. Stop new bleeding. List every debt. Attack the most expensive ones. Simplify your life so fixed costs shrink. As that happens, redirect the freed cash into savings and then into assets that pay you. If you are further along and in decent shape, preserve flexibility. Do not be tempted to chase late shortcuts. Do not leverage up your retirement because you feel behind. Focus on safety, simplicity, and predictable income. In every stage, the principle is the same. You treat your household like a small, conservative business. You keep costs low. You avoid dangerous obligations. You build reserves. And only when you are strong do you even consider using debt in a targeted way to acquire an asset that can stand on its own feet. The goal is not to copy what some billionaire does. The goal is to borrow the mindset: survival first, flexibility second, growth third, in that order. Let me tell you something that almost nobody believes when they are starting out, but every seasoned investor learns. The money is not made by doing more. The money is made by waiting more. The rich do not get rich because they are constantly in motion. They get rich because they are willing to sit still until the world offers them a truly favorable hand, and then they bet in a way that is still survivable if they are wrong. Most people treat opportunity like a bus. They think if they miss one, another will be along in 10 minutes. The wealthy treat opportunity like a pitch in baseball, where there are no called strikes. They can let 1,000 pitches go by, and nothing bad happens. The only pitches that matter are the ones they actually swing at. So they wait, and when they finally swing, it is at something they understand, at a price that makes sense, with terms that do not threaten their survival. Let us connect that to debt. People confuse the availability of credit with the presence of opportunity. The existence of a loan offer does not mean you have an opportunity. It just means someone is willing to lend you money. Whether that helps you or hurts you depends entirely on what you attach that money to. The rich are patient with both cash and credit. When nothing looks attractive, they let money pile up. They are willing to look foolish holding cash while others rush into whatever is fashionable. And if they have access to credit, they do not feel compelled to use it just because it is there. Unused borrowing capacity is a form of strength. When a real opportunity appears, they do not have to beg anyone. They are ready. Most people experience the opposite. They are fully stretched in good times. Then, when the cycle turns, when real bargains appear because others are forced to sell, they are the ones who are stuck. Imagine that you have a personal punch card with only 20 slots on it for your entire lifetime. Every time you make a major financial decision, an investment, or a use of serious debt, you have to punch one of those holes. After 20, you are done. How carefully would you think about each decision? How many things would you simply pass on because they did not meet a very high bar? That is how the wealthy think about big commitments, especially commitments involving debt. So they ask, is this opportunity good enough that I would punch my card for it? If the answer is no, they walk away. This discipline shows up in practical ways. First, they insist on a circle of competence. They know what they know, and they know what they do not know. They do not borrow to invest outside that circle. Second, they demand a margin of safety and price. Even a good asset can be a bad deal at the wrong price. If you borrow to buy something at a stretch valuation, you have very little room for error. The rich prefer to buy $1 bills for 50 or 60 cents, not for 95. Third, they are willing to be lonely. True opportunity almost always feels uncomfortable in the moment. When something is genuinely cheap, there is usually a reason people are selling. Headlines are negative. Sentiment is bad. The crowd is running the other way. The rich who know what they own and who have kept their powder dry can step in and buy while others are afraid. Think back to the last major crisis. In the middle of the panic, good assets were selling at bad prices because frightened or over-leveraged owners had no choice. The buyers were not geniuses. They were simply the ones who had prepared by staying liquid and using less debt in the good times. Now ask yourself, in the next crisis, which side will you be on? Will you be selling because you must or buying because you can? Your answer is being determined right now with the habits you are building. There is another subtle point. The rich think in decades, not months. When they attach debt to an asset, they are not asking, how can I flip this in a year? They are asking, will this still be valuable and useful in 10 or 20 years? If the only way to win is a quick exit at a higher price, that is speculation. And speculation mixed with debt is a dangerous cocktail. Contrast that with buying a modest, well-located apartment building with stable tenants. There will always be people who need a place to live. Over long periods, housing in decent locations tends to retain usefulness. If the numbers work at the start and the debt is sensible, time becomes your ally. The loan balance goes down. The rents generally rise. Your equity grows through patient arithmetic. This long view is why the rich are often content with boring returns. They do not need an asset to double in a year. They are happy with a slow, steady compound that is highly likely to persist. Let me say this plainly. You do not get a second life to recover from a truly catastrophic mistake. One over-leveraged bet that goes wrong can undo 20 years of hard work. That is why the wealthy are selective. That is why they can sit in cash. That is why they say no so often. So what does this mean for you? It means you start practicing saying no. No to hurried decisions. No to pressure. No to things you do not fully understand. No to putting debt on assets that do not produce reliable cash flow. You train yourself to value the ability to wait. It means you define your own circle of competence and stay inside it. If you work in a certain industry, you probably understand which businesses have real staying power. If you live in a certain town, you probably have a feel for which neighborhoods are solid. Use that. Do not chase the latest fad. It also means you stop thinking that opportunity shows up with a neon sign. Most of the best chances will look uncomfortable in real time. The only way you will be ready at that moment is if you have kept your balance sheet strong and your commitments modest. Remember the punch card. Remember the circle of competence. Remember the margin of safety. These are survival tools, especially when debt is in the picture. The rich turn debt into wealth because they wait for the right pitch, they understand what they are swinging at, and they structure their obligations in ways that let them survive if they are wrong. That patience, that discipline, that respect for risk, those are the real secrets. Not some formula, not some insider trick, just old-fashioned caution married to rational long-term thinking. If you adopt that mindset, if you build your household balance sheet like a fortress instead of a castle made of cards, if you say no to most things and yes only to opportunities that meet a very high standard, then over time you will find that debt if you use it at all, becomes a tool in your hands instead of a chain around your neck. And that is the difference between those who build generational wealth and those who spend their whole lives running in place, paying interest on yesterday's mistakes.